53-year-old Snoop Dogg bullied by bikers until he makes a shocking phone call. Snoop Dogg sat alone at the corner of a small roadside diner, wearing a hoodie low enough to shield his face but not his identity. At 53, the world still knew him as the rap legend. But tonight, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just a man trying to enjoy his coffee in peace. The atmosphere in the diner was warm, but the moment the door swung open, a cold tension entered with it. A group of 5 burly bikers strolled in, their leather jackets creaking, their laughter booming. One of them, a tall guy with a jagged scar running across his cheek, spotted Snoop. "Well, well," he said loudly, enough for everyone to hear. "If it isn't Mr. Rap Royalty, what brings you down here with us regular folks?" Snoop didn't look up. He sipped his coffee slowly, ignoring the snickers that followed. But the bikers weren't about to let it go. They circled his table, their shadows casting long over him. "Too good to say hello now?" Another one sneered, slapping the table hard enough to make the coffee spill. "Or are you just scared without your entourage?" The diner went quiet. Other patrons pretended to be immersed in their food, but their eyes darted nervously to the scene unfolding. Snoop finally looked up, his calm demeanor betraying none of the irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm just here for coffee," he said evenly. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Trouble found you, though," Scarface said with a smirk, leaning closer. "You're on our turf now, Hollywood." For a moment, it seemed like Snoop would let it slide, but then his phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, his expression unreadable as he glanced at the screen. Slowly, he smiled, a smile that wasn't warm, but sharp, almost challenging. He pressed a button and held the phone to his ear. "Yum, it's me," he said casually. "Yeah, we got a situation down here. Might need some friends to pull through." The bikers exchanged uncertain glances. Scarface leaned in again, trying to maintain control of the situation. "Who you calling, huh? Your bodyguards? Am not nobody scared of your Hollywood crew?" Snoop leaned back in his chair, his confidence growing by the second. "You're about to find out." The tension in the room shifted. The bikers' bravado faltered as the faint roar of engines echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. But Snoop didn't move. He just sat there, sipping his coffee, a mysterious glint in his eye. The bikers glanced toward the window, their smug expressions giving way to unease. Whatever was coming, it was big. The rumble of engines grew louder, vibrating through the floor of the diner. One by one, heads turned to the window as a line of sleek black cars and motorcycles came into view, their headlights cutting through the night like sharp blades. The vehicles came to a stop right outside, and doors began to open with deliberate precision. Scarface straightened up, his bravado slipping. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice no longer carrying the confidence it had moments ago. Snoop took another slow sip of his coffee before setting the mug down gently. Without standing, he glanced at the bikers, his calm composure only making them more nervous. "I told you," he said, his tone steady. "You were about to find out." The diner door swung open, and a man in a tailored suit stepped inside. His presence was intimidating, his expression sharp and professional. Behind him, more figures followed, men and women who looked more like they belonged in a high-stakes action movie than on a quiet roadside. The suited man stopped just short of the bikers, his hands clasped in front of him. "Mr. Dogg," he said with a respectful nod, completely ignoring the group surrounding Snoop. "We came as soon as we got your call." Scarface scoffed, trying to regain control of the situation. "What is this? Some kind of stunt? You think these guys scare us?" Snoop finally stood, his towering presence amplified by the silence that had taken over the room. "They don't have to scare you," he said, his voice low but commanding. "But maybe you should think about what happens next." One of the bikers, younger and less seasoned than the others, shifted uncomfortably. "Man, we don't want trouble," he mumbled, glancing at the figures now lining the entrance to the diner. "Oh, there's no trouble," Snoop said, his smile returning, but this time it was sharper, colder. "Unless you keep pushing." The suited man stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "Gentlemen, this can go 2 ways. You walk out of here and leave Mr. Dogg to enjoy his coffee, or—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the unspoken threat lingered heavy in the room. Scarface clenched his jaw, his fists tightening, but even he could see the odds were no longer in their favor. With a reluctant snarl, he jerked his head toward the door. "Let's go," he growled, shoving past the suited man. The bikers followed, their swagger replaced with uneasy silence as they filed out of the diner. Scarface paused at the door, turning back to Snoop. "This isn't over," he spat. Snoop didn't flinch. He simply raised his phone again, his finger hovering over the screen. "You sure about that?" Scarface hesitated for just a second too long before slamming the door behind him. The group mounted their bikes and roared off into the night, their bravado disappearing into the distance. As the tension finally eased, Snoop sat back down, picking up his mug like nothing had happened. The suited man leaned in. "Do you need anything else, sir?" Snoop shook his head, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Nah, I'm good. Thanks for coming through, though." The man nodded and motioned for his team to leave. As the diner settled back into its usual rhythm, Snoop glanced around at the wide-eyed patrons. "I can breathe now," he said with a chuckle, taking another sip of his coffee. But just as things seemed to calm, his phone buzzed again. Snoop looked at the screen, his expression changing in an instant. This time, it wasn't a call he was expecting. Snoop's casual demeanor shifted as he stared at the phone screen. His brow furrowed, and for the first time that night, a flicker of unease crossed his face. The message on the screen was brief, but it hit like a freight train. "They know." He stood abruptly, his coffee forgotten, and walked toward the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty save for a few stragglers, but the tension in his chest told him something wasn't right. The suited man, still lingering near the door, noticed the change in Snoop's expression. "Is there a problem, sir?" he asked, his tone cautious. Snoop didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the horizon, his instincts screaming that the night wasn't over. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Get everyone back here, now." The man nodded without question, pulling out his earpiece and barking orders. Within moments, the sleek black cars were returning, engines roaring as the team reassembled. Snoop turned to the diners, his gaze sweeping over their confused faces. "I might want to get out talk here," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. One by one, the patrons hurriedly gathered their things and exited, leaving only Snoop and his team. The diner felt eerily quiet now, the hum of tension filling the air. Suddenly, the sound of motorcycles broke the silence. This wasn't the same group as before. The roar was louder, more aggressive, and when the first bike came into view, it was clear this wasn't just a coincidence. Scarface wasn't bluffing. The bikers, now joined by an even larger crew, pulled into the parking lot like a storm descending. Their headlights created a glaring wall of light, and the leader, a new figure with a commanding presence, dismounted and walked toward the diner. Through the window, Snoop watched him approach, his expression unreadable. The suited man stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Snoop held up a hand to stop him. "This one's mine," he said, his voice calm but laced with something dangerous. Snoop stepped outside, the night air thick with tension. The biker leader smirked as he stopped a few feet away. "You think you can just make a call and scare us off? We don't back down that easy." Snoop chuckled, shaking his head. "You got it twisted. This isn't about scaring you off. It's about teaching you when to quit." The leader raised an eyebrow. "And how you gonna do that? With your fancy suits and cars?" Snoop didn't answer. Instead, he whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed into the night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then from the shadows, figures began to emerge. They weren't dressed in suits or leather jackets. They were ordinary people. Men and women of all ages and backgrounds. Factory workers, teachers, veterans, and young dreamers. They came in droves, filling the parking lot until the bikers were outnumbered. The leader's smirk faltered. "What the hell is this?" "This," Snoop said, gesturing to the crowd, "is what happens when you mess with the wrong people. These are my people. They're here because they believe in something bigger than your little gang." The bikers exchanged uneasy glances as the crowd moved closer, their silent presence more intimidating than any threat. "You got two choices," Snoop continued, his voice steady. "You can walk away, or you can find out just how deep this goes. But I promise you one thing, you won't like what's waiting for you." The leader hesitated, his confidence draining with every second. Finally, he threw his hands up in frustration. "This isn't worth it," he muttered, motioning for his crew to back off. As the bikers roared away into the night, the crowd erupted in quiet cheers, their unity palpable. Snoop turned back to the suited man, who nodded in approval. Inside the diner, Snoop sat back down, finally finishing his now cold coffee. His phone buzzed again, this time with a different message. "Well played." With a smirk, Snoop leaned back in his chair. "Always got to keep me guessing," he muttered to himself. Sometimes the quietest power is the one that stands united. What would you do if the odds were stacked against you? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to share this story to inspire someone today.